fascinating book discussion and a book launch, first of all, as you can see on my right, on my left, actually. First edition of Well Played, From Here to Eternity, Rajeev Bagarhatta in conversation with Pariksith Singh, and the launch by Abhinav Bindra and Naresh Trehan. An inspiring story of transition and transformation drawn from Jagdish Prasad's unorthodox journey, the book is about, well, you'll find out. Born into a middle-class family, from Alwar in Rajasthan in 1933, Jagdish grew up to become a star hockey player, playing alongside the legendary Major Dhyan Chand. After his hockey career, he started a new innings as a humble physical instructor in an obscure corner of SMS Medical College, Savai Man Singh Medical College, where he came in contact with eminent cardiologists like Dr. K.C. Kotia and Dr. S.K. Sharma. This led him to start researching cardiac rehabilitation, the first of its kind in the country back in the early 1970s. Disregarding the naysayers and overcoming obstinate opposition, Jagdish bridged the chasm between science and humanities and assimilated cardiac rehabilitation with routine cardiac care, an essential of modern cardiology practice. Our speakers today, in this order, Rajeev Bagarhatta, the author of the book, is a renowned cardiologist with decades of experience. After specialization from PGIMER in Chandigarh and fellowships in Australia and USA, he is presently the principal and controller of the SMS Medical College and attached group of hospitals, Jaipur. Our second panelist today is Mr. Abhinav Bindra, an Indian Olympic gold medalist, a retired sports shooter, as you might very well all know, and a businessman. He is the first and only one of two Indians to win an individual Olympic gold medal from Beijing 2008. Our third panelist today is Naresh Trehan, an Indian cardiovascular and cardiothoracic surgeon, pardon my pronunciation. After graduating from King George Medical College in Lucknow, he went on to practice at New York University Medical Center in Manhattan from 1971 to 1988. He returned to India and started Escort's Heart Institute and Research Center. Our moderator today for this session is Pariksith Singh, an MD, board-certified internal medicine. Upon completion of his residency, Dr. Singh relocated to Florida and worked for several years before establishing Access Healthcare LLC in 2001. His poetry, story, literary critiques, and many translations from Hindi, Sanskrit, Persian, and Urdu carry a strikingly original and creative interplay of form and content, technique and narrative, style and substance. Our esteemed panel today to launch the book, Well Played, From Here to Eternity.
Hello, everyone. Since time is short, I will move fast, and we'll try to get as much out of Dr. Bagarhatta as possible. So, to me, it is a singular pleasure to be with some of the most esteemed people in our world of sports, health, and rehab. It is what I would say a double or triple pleasure, especially because Dr. Bagarhatta and I share a lot of common experiences, same school, same college, same profession. And I would like to start off right away with asking what this book is about. Well Played, From Here to Eternity. Please tell us what it is about.
Thanks, Prashit. Well, this book is a human story, a story about a simple human being and his unorthodox, unexpected trajectory of his life and his career. So, having said that, this book is about struggles. This book is about compassion and passion to make through every struggle. And also, this book will be able to inspire generations across, just to see that a single passion, a single thought can create wonders no matter what the obstacles are.
And I noticed that you have addressed the protagonist in the book in multiple manners, as a son, as a physician, as a writer. And one can say that greatness actually comes in small packages. A small, humble man, he built something great, not only for healthcare, but for the nation. When you were writing this, how did you plan it? How did you research it? Could you tell us how you went about it?
The thought of writing this book came to me when my father had already passed away. But I realized that when I was growing up, there was something unusual about this human story, which I thought should be brought to public, brought to people to know about the fact of this life, that he has transited in a very unusual manner. He made a transit from sports to cardiac rehab, which was unheard of before this. Yes, agreed. There was a lot of research while I proceeded with the book writing. There was some flow of thoughts, but at the same time, a lot of research had gone into it while I was penning down my thoughts.
How did you research it?
Well, as I mentioned that my father had passed away when I started writing about it. So, though it was a book, though it is a journey of my father, but one will be surprised that I had to interview at least 200 people while I went through, the journey of writing this book. I visited places where he had taken birth. I mean, Alwar was the place where he was born. I visited the city where he was born, where he grew up, the college and the school. I also came to know, I researched a lot about the places where he visited, the geopolitical changes which were taking place in Mosul, in Iraq. He had also been to Wisconsin. So, I also found out about Mosul, about Wisconsin, and I saw movies related to Iraq, the Iraq War, at the time of Saddam. And now joining those dots, I had some facts with me, and from there on, I wove this story, so that's what.
So from the book, it seems that we are seeing a personality with many different aspects, sometimes even opposite characteristics. For example, he's a very humble man, yet he can be forceful when something is important. He even slaps one of his students. He is self-abnegating, he hides himself. He's a man of faith, yet he is very strong in promoting himself. When you write about such a person and you connect all the dots, what was the most difficult portion of the book? What was the most challenging aspect?
Well, you already mentioned that. The joining of the dots was the most difficult. I had the facts in place. I knew about the facts, that the times and lives which were there in Wisconsin in 1970s, about Mosul in 1980, about the Iraq War, about some aspects I knew from his friends, from his contemporaries who were still alive, that how did he proceed with his research in cardiac rehabilitation. And the rest of the story was woven. So creating that, to weave a story about a person which you know, about the facts, and to put them in place, that was the most difficult part, I thought.
So, did you have to imagine certain things?
Yeah, definitely.
You have the facts right, but You are to fill in the story.
Absolutely.
Okay. So it is curious, and of course Jaipur today does not reflect it, but Jaipur of those times was a very small city. And those who are familiar with the city, everyone knew everybody. There was only one medical school. It was a center of education, and all the educational institutes were right next to each other. And relationship was very important in his life. So I would like to question you about, despite all the challenges that you encountered in writing, what were the most enjoyable parts of the book and which you still can enjoy as a reader?
The most difficult part of his journey was the most enjoyable part, which I wrote down. So, writing about his transformation from the field of sports to the field of medicine, from the arts to science, that was the most enjoyable part, which I wrote down. See, arts or humanities and science are not mutually exclusive. They both are very creative processes. Insight, inspiration, and intuition, all these are creative triggers, whether be it for humanities or for science. So much so that when Newton was asked about the laws of planetary motion, somebody asked him, do you know it? Have you proven it? He says, I know it, and I'll prove it. So he had the intuition, and that's what. So this was a very difficult part. Whether a person from arts can move on to humanities at a ripe age of 35 or 40 years, they are not mutually exclusive. This is the main highlight which I wanted to bring out, and which was difficult, but at the same time very enjoyable. There's another instance which I think is worth mentioning here. When the great mathematician, he went to Cambridge, he was given the fellowship by, he was invited for fellowship by Mr. Hardy.
You're talking about Ramanujan.
Ramanujan, yeah.
Ramanujan.
Ramanujan, the great mathematician. So, nothing could stop Ramanujan because a great thought had come in his mind. He was a great mathematician. He did not have any degree with him. In spite of that, he managed, he could get to have a fellowship from there. 50 years down the line or 70 years down the line, Jagdish had the same experience. He did not hold a medical degree. He was a man of arts. But in spite of that, because of the force of his thought, because of the research which he did, he was ushered into the field of medical fraternity. So if the thought is great, none can stop, neither the rules nor no obstacle can stop anybody. So this was very inspiring. This was very difficult to put into words, but at the same time, this was very satisfying.
And I noticed there's a part about sports in here. So Abhinav, would you like to have any comments or critique on that and maybe take this from here?
You write about this special relationship with Dhyan Chand. We'd love to hear a little bit more about it, and also the challenges that athletes faced at that time. Would love to hear a little bit about this special bond with Dhyan Chand especially.
Yeah. When I was researching about this book, way back in 1950s, when Rajasthan was just setting up, I discovered that prior to that, the matches in the city were being held in the Jaipur cricket ground, that is JCC ground, and the Maharaja College grounds. But at that time, some good Samaritans from the city who had walked out from the state to Bombay and to the Eastern India part, that is Mafatlals, Rungtas, they had donated some amount of money, and that's how the SMS stadium came up. So those were the challenges. There were no good know-how. What to talk of know-how, there were no good places to play, but still the people managed. My father had a very convivial or avuncular relationship with Major Dhyan Chand. Here it goes. The plains of Punjab shiver in the biting cold of winter months, when temperatures plummet to fathomless levels. The occupants of a sports hostel in Patiala were still lazing around in their blankets on a cold Sunday morning in December 1962. Gradually, but surely, strains of sunlight streamed through the veranda, light claiming patch of territory after bright patch, drying up the soft overnight dew that had turned the glass panes opaque. Light tinged with heat stirred the bones of these inhabitants into some form of activity. Dhyan Chand, the chief coach, got up to make a refreshing cup of tea. He broke into a convivial chat. The new movie, Sahib Bibi or Gulam, has already been released in Delhi last week. Gurudat and Vaida have acted beautifully in it, he said. How about going for the show today, Director Saab? He suggested. Jagdish, the Director Saab, agreed hesitantly. It may be freezing in Delhi, but I don't have the audacity to spurn your offer, he said. And off they went on a day-long excursion to the Regal Theatre in Delhi. All through the evening, Dhyan Chand kept a low profile, lest the crowd should recognize and mob him.
Thank you. That's a beautiful passage, and we appreciate it. And we'll talk about the literary device, how, if we have time, we'll talk about the technique you used in literature that is used without perhaps being conscious of it, which is why it's beautiful. We have Dr. Trehan here, who is a renowned surgeon, and I would defer to him if you would like to talk about any medical concerns here.
So, off the bat, I think Rajeev has been quite sort of modest about talking about the accomplishments of his father. It's a story of grit and transition. So, as at a starting point of being a sports instructor, to actually peer through the glass ceiling and saying that we are doing what we are doing, not knowing what we are doing. So all the instructions and all the things that were being given as an instructor to the sportsman had no basis to really understand how does the actual physiology of the cardiovascular system and the musculoskeletal system works. So that thought that actually gave him that impetus for transition into, and if you look at it, Rajeev, he just knocked on every door to say, is there a lab here where I can come get in and do some knowledge building for ourselves? And ultimately, after going through several years, and I must say, SMS sounds like a hotbed of high-end physicians who were very, very interested in teaching and cooperating with their students. And like you mentioned, Jagdish didn't have a medical degree. He was just an instructor. From then he transitioned, and the big story that hits me in this whole book is that he wrote to Dr. Wilson at LRCP, which is a big rehab center. LCRP was the Mecca at that time of rehabilitative medicine, especially cardiovascular. So Jagdish wrote to Dr. Wilson saying that I'm not a doctor, I don't have a degree, but I am really, really interested and determined to learn more, and could you give me a fellowship? So, I mean, this had never happened in the history of LCRP. But the sheer persistence and the curiosity of Dr. Wilson that who's this fellow who has the guts to actually write to me to say I'm not a doctor but I want to be associated with the research, itself got him that job, that 6 months job. And then again he comes back and he finds that people are actually respecting him again, although he was not from the medical fraternity. So these are cardiologists who actually worked with him and developed. And today, I must say, work done in the 70s, many people have added to it. But today, the sophistication with which cardiac rehabilitation is being done, and if you look at it today, it's a reborn interest because of COVID. You know, in COVID, especially in the Delta wave, we saw upwards of 25% of the people got their hearts or myocardial function got affected by the virus. People didn't know that. This is something we also realized after having understood that the virus was going everywhere and there were people who were falling dead, getting heart attacks in the middle of COVID, people who had no history of heart disease. So that's when we understood also that this virus is dangerous enough for people who are actually doing active physical activity in the sense of extreme, of, like gymming and stuff like that, at a young age. If they had the imprint of the virus in their heart, they would be prone to ventricular fibrillation, which is basically the heart stops pumping and it starts quivering, and death is only 5 minutes away. So I think this whole thing has really, the contribution of this whole build-up from then on to now has contributed hugely to humanity. That's what I wanted to actually add here. It's not just a story about him, but the outcome of what it is.
Thank you, Dr. Trehan. Those comments are very impactful, and they tell us the revolution that was brought in, not only in the city, not only in the state, not only in the country, but the whole subcontinent. As far as we know, this is the first time cardiac rehab started in the subcontinent. And so that achievement is amazing, what was accomplished. I want to talk about the literary device you used here, which almost reminds me of Forrest Gump, although its comparisons are unfair with Forrest Gump. But the story of Forrest Gump is not the story of a man. As he grows, it's the story of a society, of a culture, of a country. You have written a story, the story of your father, but it takes bigger dimensions. It is not only intertwined with your story, but the story of the state, the country, and maybe even internationally. Did you consciously write in this manner, using this device, or this just flowed?
Well, nostalgia and history is my weakness. So while I was writing about my father, I had to delve in those situations where he was working. It was the times in 60s when the Indian society was taking its turn. There were some misconceptions after independence about the realistic, pragmatism was losing out. We had Satyakam was a movie which came at that time, which, unraveled the myth which the independence had given us. Nehruji had gone away. India had lost in hockey in 1960s, and rehab was just taking place. At the same time, Jaipur was, transforming from a smaller city to the newer colonies were being built up, and SMS was expanding. So I wanted to make this particular human story a part of a larger perspective. And I used the device, I used the imagination with the facts in place to create this story. So in fact, I lived in that era. While the time for 2 years when I was writing this book, for those 2 years, 24 hours, I was living into that era. Whether the people of those era, the times, and hospital of that era. So basically, I was trying to recreate the times of this.
It's an amazing approach you have taken. But say we are doctors, or Abhinav is a professional. Why should, and this will be a provocative question, why should anyone read it? Why should a layperson be interested in such a book?
I think it could be a manual for making of everyday hero. This should be inspiring for generations across, because of the fact that if you have an idea, nothing is going to stop you. You too can do it is the word of, is the message which I would like to give. And I'm sure if you read through this, you will be able to inspire yourself, motivate yourself.
We are going to be running out of time. We have only 4 minutes left, so I'm going to ask our other panelists if they have any comments, and then maybe we can open it up. I would like you to read another passage, which I find very touching at the end. Abhinav, you have any other questions about sports, or if that's your forte?
No, just a very generic question on the role of sport. Your dad, of course, had a big sporting history. Just how has sport shaped you as a person, and how has sport shaped you also in your medical career and in your medical profession?
Well, I inherited that. The sporting instincts I inherited from my father and from my family. And definitely that has shaped me into a more interactive clinician. And as we understand, though the artificial intelligence is coming in, the gadgets are coming in, but the interaction is being missed in the communication with the patients. And this I gained from sports. Yeah.
So I have 3 minutes, and I need you to read one of the most touching passages of the book where Jagdish ji passes away and Rajeev immerses his ashes in the Ganges. And even though it's his story, I could relate to it. It was deeply felt. Would you be willing to read that? I know it's very personal,
Yeah.
but I want people to know how much is there in this book.
So here it goes. The sibilant whoosh of the Ganga flowing a few meters away was lost in the chants of mantras from an unending row of pandits and shouts of Har Har Gange. गंगा मैया में जब तक के पानी रहे मेरे सजना तेरी जिंदगानी रहे. Oh my dear, your life may be as long as the life of the waters flowing down the mother Ganga. The song kept blaring from the ubiquitous shanties near the ghat. The river Ganga defined eternity and immortality. Into that eternity, I submitted my Baba. Amidst the incantations, I liberated my Baba, or perhaps myself. Intuitively, I pressed one on the keyboard of my cell phone. The screen showed Baba's phone, ringing, ringing. Baba, sab theek se ho gaya hai. I wanted to tell him if he would only answer the call. Everything has been taken care of, Baba.
Thank you. That was a beautiful passage, very touching, very human, and it's a story about a man who pulled himself by the socks despite all the challenges and accomplished something great for what we take for granted today. Dr. Trehan, would you like to have any final comments on this? Say something?
Yeah, the whole thing is that for Rajeev now, Jagdish's voluminous work, very important work, is an overhang. And he is actually knowing what he has been doing and how he has developed it further, only tells you that that admiration which you had for your father, and not many sons have that much of admiration of their fathers, but you have then carried it to a next level, which is a compliment to you also. So I think this generational thing, which is actually contributing knowledge and contributing safety to humanity, is a big contribution. If I may criticize the book, the detailing, and in your search you've gone through a lot of things and narrations, but the continuity and reference to dates would have made it much more contextual to the reader. So, because you still have to connect dots, and maybe that was your intention, to say, okay, guess when this happened. Guess whether he... So I think for it takes, because it's a very pleasurable book in the sense of people who are motivated to say, you feel sorry for yourself because you're stuck in this place. I mean, the book tells you it's all your fault if you feel you're stuck in a place. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a singular pleasure to have some of the greats in our country today in sports, rehab, and healthcare. We appreciate you all, and I wish great success to this book published by Rupa. I recommend each of you buy it and read through it. It's a great read. Thank you.
Thank you to the esteemed panel. The discussion indeed played out well. Ladies and gentlemen, Rajeev Bagarhatta, Abhinav Bindra, Naresh Trehan in conversation with Pariksith Singh. A huge round of applause for them. You can also find our author, Dr. Rajeev Bagarhatta, at the author signing stall right after this session on my right. Thank you, and we'll just begin with this next session in 30 seconds, hopefully.
के लिए कोई समझौता नहीं। सत्यता और निष्पक्षता है हमारी जिम्मेदारी। सच के लिए कोई समझौता नहीं। भास्कर लिखेगा सच्ची बात बेधड़क।
There